I'm one of those weird atheists, I guess, who enjoys the Christmas holiday. But I also enjoy sort of drawing a big red flashing circle around the pagan origins of so many of these Christ-oriented traditions. And to help me talk about that is a dear friend of mine who I know does a lot of talking about gods and sort of the debunking of gods. His name, of course, is Aron Ra. And Aron, it's great to see you again, my friend.
Thank you. You too, sir.
Every time I see you, I always feel like I'm watching the 13th Warrior, you know, when Bovine holds the sword out and does battle against the Horde. Talk to me real fast, you know, seeing how you're named after a god. Let's talk about your name, because I know there were always new people being introduced to Aron Ra. So give us the backstory.
Well, about 20 years ago, there was this thing called Usenet, or the news groups, and I needed a handle for that. And so my name is already Aron, and I wanted to do a nod to the Egyptian composite god Amen-Ra, because I saw him as a template for the god of Western monotheism. There's a lot of similarities between these two. Yahweh is typically described as volcano god throughout the Old Testament, but then at some point he also becomes a composite air god and sun god. And that's when I noticed the similarities. There are some writers who say that the original concept of Yahweh, the Canaanite original concept, had a wife at one time named Asherah or Atheret, and so did Amun-Ra, amazingly, so that these two could actually be the same god, so that they're like composites of each other. So I just wanted to give a nod to what I think is the template for Western monotheism. And I had no idea. I had no idea that I was going to get sort of famous under that name.
Well, I was going to say, you ever role play? You mean, you ever just put on some sort of a costume, and go out and?
Well, my wife is a bit goth, so we do go, like every time I go to London, there's a little shop there called Sai in Camden Town, and I like to buy the steampunk outfits and stuff like that, and I do play dress up a little bit in my videos with those.
So do you do Christmas, or are you one of these guys who's just so fed up with the commerciality and all the misunderstandings and the privilege, religious Christian privilege and the bullshit that you just want none of it?
I don't have a lot of love for Christmas. I really don't. I mean, Santa Claus is tied to my atheism just a little bit, because I stayed a believer in Santa when I was 8 years old, only because I honored my father, and my father told me that it was a Santa Claus, and my father would never lie to me, would you, Daddy?
So what? When did you figure it out? When did the dream die?
Exactly that sentence. I was in an argument with another child, and I said, and my daddy would never lie to me, would you, Daddy? And my father's response was, there's no Santa Claus, son.
They used to not. I mean, we did Santa stuff in a fun way, but I don't remember ever having the Santa talk. And the narrative in the Christian culture that I was raised in was, well, if you teach them that Santa's real, if you play act, if you leave the cookies and milk out and you make the sounds of hoofs on the chimney and you act it out for the imagination of the child, and then the child becomes shattered, when they realize there's no Santa. Well, what are they going to do when you teach them about Jesus? And this was an actual warning given to religious parents. So whatever you do, don't treat Santa like he is real, because then your child will be more likely to disbelieve you when it comes to Jesus. The irony over this is so thick I can barely see my way through it, right?
Yeah, well, I can tell you honestly, when that happened, my father's response was, there's no Santa Claus, son. And I was devastated. I was sucker punched. That meant that my dad had actually lied to me and put me in this position where I'm defending my father's honor of this ridiculous thing that I'm believing only because my daddy told me so, right? And I'm 8 years old. I mean, what 8-year-old still believes in Santa? But, I know it's ridiculous. I know it's impossible, but my father wants to encourage me to believe this.
I think a lot of 8-year-olds sort of,
It was not a minute later, a stunned silence before when he said there's no Santa, and I sat there silent for a whole minute before I said, what about Jesus?
What was his response?
Well, it came from his wife, who said, oh, he's real. Like,
yeah.
And just the way she said it, it was like, yeah, sure he is.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's white and he has, beautiful flowing hair and blue eyes. And I know how that goes here in the United States. I'm interested in the whole.
We have pictures.
Oh, forgive me. Go ahead.
Now in my house, it was my grandmother's portrait of Jesus. She has the baby Viking Jesus. That was our Jesus, the Jesus of my family, the Jesus portraits that we have in our house. Blonde hair, blue eyes, carries, no, that was his father, that carries an axe. And
your Jesus had a father, Yahweh, who carried an axe?
Well, it's supposed to be Joseph and Mary.
Oh, okay. So Joseph had an axe. I'm
yes,
still
exactly.
not. What the hell kind of Christmas did you have? They're not doing this at Sunday Go to Meeting here in the Bible Belt. They don't have a weaponized Jesus story going on with Mary and Joseph. So where does the Viking Jesus come from?
Well, because every tradition, every ethnicity changes Jesus to become what they are. I mean, you've seen the Hispanic Jesus, the Black Jesus, right? Have you seen portraits of Black Jesus?
Oh, yeah.
My personal favorite is the Southern Black Velvet Jesus.
I saw, I did a whole presentation on it. It's called The Changing Face of Jesus. And we had Asian Jesus. That was the one that kind of freaked me out a little bit because it was so weird to see Jesus in that context with Asian features. And of course, you and I live in a culture where to show him as a Middle Eastern man it's offensive to some U.S. Christians. They just can't jive with that.
No, I've seen Black Jesus that looks completely believable. I can see what you're saying. So I've got at least a little bit of background of seeing the Hispanic Jesus, the Black Jesus, the Elvis Jesus. That's the one on the black velvet paintings. And then, of course, my Viking Jesus with the blonde hair, the blue eyes, and the father with the axe. But I've never seen an Asian Jesus. So yeah, that would throw me a little bit.
So, we're talking about the supposed birth of Jesus, which Christians have been drifting away from, the stuff they're starting to really be challenged on and have been over the past few decades. I mean, unless you're Kent Hoeven. They're like, well, we know Jesus wasn't necessarily born on December 25th. But he was born around this time, and they start to kind of do that thing where it's the ever-moving goalposts. Have you gotten into the winter solstice conversations and started to get into the pagan gods in any of those discussions?
I'm really thrown off by Jeremiah 10. What is the apologetics that they always want to throw in there, how that's not describing a Christmas tree? Supposedly there's some interpretation where when you cut down this tree and you put it on a cross stand, two pieces of wood so that the thing doesn't fall over, and you bring it into your house and you decorate it. And this is not a tree. How is this not a Christmas tree? I don't know what the interpretation is, because you're forbidden to do this in Jeremiah 10, but the Christians do it anyway. Because when don't Christians, violate their own commandments? They're out there eating shellfish.
Yeah, I've seen a bunch of pastors. The hippest pastors always have tattoos. I always wonder how they jive that with the Old Testament.
Exactly. I mean, you see, what I would love to see, somebody that has the tattoo of the part of the Bible that says which chapter in Leviticus says thou shalt not be tattooed. But yeah, I made a video about this very recently myself, where I talk about you guys just pick and choose. And, you're divorced and you're on your third marriage, but didn't Jesus say that you can't get divorced? And if you do end up divorced, you can't get remarried? He kept forbidding that over and over again. I mean, he made the exception that you can, he was pressed into an exception where he said, okay, you can get divorced if she was unfaithful to you. But then you're still prohibited even then from marrying someone who had been married before. So, man, here I am arguing with Christians on their third marriage.
But back to the holiday season, I know a lot of people are like me. We get a little warm and fuzzy when it comes time to, get, we put up the tree and we have Bing Crosby on the radio. My left eye starts to twitch when I hear pop stars butcher my favorite Christmas songs on the radio. I mean, is Christmas like that real cheeseball Mentos commercial? give me an insulin shot, Christmas music have the same sort of does it prompt the same homicidal tendencies in you that it does in many other people?
When I was a young man, I remember working the Christmas season in a drugstore. And it was one of those drugstores, they have the programmed music playing all the time. And it's like every Christmas song ever recorded. And I just felt at some point, like if I hear one more version of Winter Wonderland, I'm going to go homicidal in aisle 7. Wow.
Yeah. By the way, I look forward to an apologist quote mining us both saying that we would become homicidal because now, we'll end up on somebody's video about those dangerous atheists. But, Father Christmas.
I never had any love for Christmas. I really didn't. I mean, like any kid, I liked getting presents. But the only, at some point we were talking about a Viking Santa. Well, that was my image of Santa Claus. My image of Santa Claus had a braided beard and a little bit of blood on his red leather jacket.
Oh, my God. I
have so many portraits of Santa Claus with a bearded axe. And
that sounds like, at least it makes Christmas more interesting. Like, I just found out a few years ago, and there's been a feature film released and sort of the cat's out of the bag in the United States, but, over in Amsterdam and that part of the world, the Krampus, the Christmas demon, Santa's nasty little helper they have the Krampus parade. And I'm like, shit, if they'd had that here in the United States, Christmas would be, it'd be a close second to Halloween is my favorite holiday. The Krampus is awesome.
Yep. The concept of Krampus, I really like. My wife found a costume maker. We were trying to come up with the goat legs that we were up on fetlocks, so that I would have to be, standing on my tippy toes in this costume with these huge freaking goat horns. We're like, oh, now there's a look. Yeah, I like that look.
and for, if there are like a few people who may not know what the Krampus is, I mean, we talk about Santa's little helper, but, the idea is that, if you make the nice list, the good list, that Santa goes around and he gives you gifts, okay? You are rewarded for good behavior. But in this dark Krampus narrative, if you are not good, Krampus will just straight up kick your ass. He'll beat you with whips and chains. He'll, I think in some of the stories, he actually drags you down and throws you at the foot of Lucifer in hell, and you burn for the rest of your life. I know he drags you somewhere in a sack. It's really.
Why do you need a Lucifer in that story? Because you've already got, the God and Satan already encapsulated in Santa and Krampus sitting in a sleigh together.
It's like an Eli Roth movie. It just becomes this absolute horror. And yet people love the tradition. And the parades are awesome. And those Krampus costumes are crazy. Do you get into like Father Christmas, Santa Claus, the origins of where we get Santa, those types of things?
Oh, I used to dabble in that quite a lot. I mean, that was the one thing I liked about Christmas was just I liked Satan Claus. As a matter of fact, my Halloween costume once upon a time was Satan Claus, where I dress up as Santa Claus, but my skin is all red and I have these two big red horns.
Talk to me about some of these discussions you're having about Christmas with those who don't understand that we're doing paganism every freaking December. It's paganism, and they don't understand it and or they won't accept it. Sort of walk me through that.
So one of the reportedly Druidic beliefs was that you would sacrifice a tree because that's your living sacrifice is a sacrifice of life, and they worship trees. So they're gonna set a tree on fire, isolate one tree by itself, and set that tree on fire, and that was their sacrifice. But then you had the Christians coming in saying, well, no, you don't want to actually do a sacrifice, a living sacrifice. Why don't you just symbolize a sacrifice? So they would put candles in a tree so to make it look like it's burning. And then, of course, you have to have a sacrifice of also worldly goods. And it's especially good if those worldly goods that are sacrificed are things that won't melt in that fire so that the church can still abscond with them.
But no, I'd always heard the old legend about Martin Luther. The tree was pagan, but it was Martin Luther who put candles all around the tree. And this was where we got the first Christmas lights. I hadn't heard the emulation of a burning of the evergreen.
Yeah, and so you bring in the Yule log also, and I can't remember what the significance of, just off the top of my head, I can't remember what the significance of the Yule log is, but that was another pagan tradition. And then Santa Claus himself, when I mentioned Viking Santa, that really is the case, because Santa was Odin at some point. So you got not only Viking, but he's one-eyed. And, you're supposed to be flying around, initially with Sleipnir, and then the Laplanders took it over and said, well, no, we've got reindeer and that's cooler somehow. So then you just adopt that. And then Coca-Cola gets a hold of it, and there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, the original origin of it, and this is legendary too, because none of this really happened. But this all goes back to the Santa Claus is based on a legend of another character. The character was really real, but the story apparently didn't really happen. There was this guy named Saint Nicholas during the Nicene Convention, and when it was Arius and Athanasius who were having an argument over whether Jesus is a created thing or whether he is the essence of God, and the winner declares that Jesus is 100% man and 100% God, because none of that makes any sense, and then the loser was banished to Medina, I think, to then become the basis within 100 years or so of Islam, where Jesus is a created being and just a prophet of God. But the story with St. Nicholas is that St. Nicholas had no logical argument against the guys that are saying that Jesus is not a created being. The guys who take my side, that Jesus never said he was God, that he said God is someone else, somewhere else, who knows things Jesus doesn't know and can do things Jesus can't do. So when they're using that argument, St. Nicholas walks up and punched the guy in the face. So there's your Santa Claus, right? Merry Christmas, have a knuckle sandwich.
Going back to the Yule logs, I had heard the tradition, or had read that the tradition was a Norse tradition where they would light the logs, a big bonfire, and then they'd have a festival, and they would celebrate until the last ember had burned out, and that could go on for days and days. And so when you see the Yule logs burning, it's always been sort of tied back to this old pagan or Norse festival.
Provided the date. The date of Christmas, December 25th, because that date was used by a number of different religions, whether it was the celebration day or whether it was literally the birth of their god. There were several of them that shared that birthday.
You're talking about an offering. They bring in these evergreen boughs in sort of anticipation of the return of warmer weather, longer days, the return of the sun, but not the Son of God. It's actually the sun in the sky. And I thought that was, it's interesting because everybody's talking about Jesus as the reason for the season. And I'm like, well, actually, no, I think Saturn might qualify a little more closely than Jesus. I don't know, any more gods or traditions strike you?
Well, it's not Saturn necessarily. It's the
Mithra?
No, it's not the equinox. What is it? I forget what they call the position in the sky where it's the longest night. And then but it's the position. It's how low the sun is in the sky for that 3 days before it begins to ascend again. So it's like the darkest period of the night or of the winter in this case. And so it's like a lot of different religions in this hemisphere, the northern hemisphere, of course, celebrate that event. And it was more so in Europe than anywhere else because they actually experienced winter more than anywhere else, and more particularly, of course, in the northern parts of Europe, which is why you get all these traditions from Norway and Lapland and the holly wreath and all like this, which all ties into the Norse mythology.
I know mistletoe and holly and all those things have pagan origins. The Christmas traditions that we celebrate and many Christians embrace as Christian traditions were once considered so pagan in the mid-1800s here in the United States that they were actually Christmas celebrations of those kind were outlawed. It was actually against the law to practice and celebrate Christmas in these specific ways, which I find very interesting. So
it is, and look at what commercialization will do. This is my biggest problem with capitalism. I believe in a balance between political or economic systems. That you should have, that there should be counterbalances to weigh out so that one extreme doesn't run away with the other, the balance between capitalism and socialism and all like this. But what we see with capitalism is that people will bend over and break all their own rules for the sake of making more money. And when Coca-Cola does Santa Claus, well, no, not only is Christmas not going to be illegal anymore, that's going to be our biggest cash cow.
Do you see those videos online? You see those people going on Black Friday and ripping stuff off the end caps and climbing over countertops, and it's just a freaking mob. I mean, do you actually have that feeling of grief in your heart? This kind of sort of commercial decadence going on marks some of the darkest parts of us. I worked in retail. I was a customer service manager for Walmart when I was 18, 19. And I remember they weren't open 24 hours at that time. So they would open way early, 6 a.m. And you'd see them pushing through. The door would be bowing out like they were going to break through, pressing against the glass. And I saw fist fights between customers over products, toys, whatever was hot back then, Teddy Ruxpin or Tickle Me Elmo, or, it's always something new every year. I saw one lady climb over a layaway counter and deck the layaway woman, the woman working the desk, because she lost a layaway package. I saw fights in line over who was going to be in line. I saw people grabbing stuff out of other people's carts. It was like Thunderdome out there, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it as well.
Yeah, I never embraced the Christmas thing. It's kind of embarrassing for me now, but I mean, I remember I was in a relationship with this woman who was raised by people who really did Christmas right. And when I was at her family's house and I could see how they did Christmas, I'm like, wow, I can see how you would think that this is lovely. They have every tradition. They have the whole family over. There's 50 people at the house. There's it's amazing how much cooking they do, and all the music. And I'm always watching Jimmy Stewart, and all of that Christmas stuff, right? I'm like, you guys do it right. I can't. I can't embrace it. So, I mean,
you don't strike me as the warm fuzzy. I mean, you're a big teddy bear. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about you are one of the most accessible people that I know, right? Everybody who knows you loves you, but I just don't see you sitting in the corner next to the tree eating Christmas fudge. And, I mean, I get that, right? I get that.
We were staying with these other people at one point, and they said, should we do anything for Christmas? And I remember I grabbed a Santa hat. Somebody had a Santa hat, and I put it on top of a tropical plant, and I decorated the tropical plant with prescription medicine bottles and empty bottles of Dr. Pepper and stuff like that, and made the ornaments out of garbage like that. And then, there's our Christmas tree. That just showed my complete disrespect for the holiday.
I know with Fox News every year, like clockwork, they kick in the war on Christmas for ratings, blah, blah, blah. You live in Texas. So, I mean, what's it like? I mean, do you guys still deal with those types of things in your circle? Hey, Jesus is under attack, but thanks to Donald Trump, we can now say Merry Christmas again. I'm hearing some of those types of things.
Well, I obviously never had a problem. I mean, how many times have you and I said Christmas today? Yeah. We keep forgetting that there's a war on Christmas until we are reminded by the Christians that we're supposedly starting it.
I'm supposed to be involved I'm supposed to be on the front lines of a war on Christmas, and I keep looking around going, I never got my draft card. I have no idea, when I'm supposed to report. I haven't done anything of note. I haven't been compensated for my trouble. I saw a statistic. Someone have to back me up on how many different holidays there are between, mid-November and mid-January. And I think it comes to a few dozen holidays. So in that context, saying happy holidays to somebody is just an accessible way of making sure the holiday season is acknowledged, right?
Yeah, and look at the way that Christians have done their holidays. I mean, they have no place to talk about the war on Christmas, because they did the war on Halloween, right? Halloween was the celebration of the harvest, and because it was a pagan holiday, of religious or pagan religious tradition originally, then the Christians come in and they bastardize it and they turn it into where, according to the way you celebrate it, this is all evil, right? So they take an element of All Saints or the All Hallows or whatever, and then they turn it into something that is completely evil through their commercial misappropriation. But then they realize they don't have a celebration of the harvest anymore, so they had to create a new one. called Thanksgiving, which is what Halloween was. So now this is Christians creating their new holiday, which is also very similar to the way Christmas is celebrated, because now it's a month later, and so they're starting to take Christmas traditions for the huge feast that used to be part of the Christmas thing too. So they've taken out the drunkenness part of it, because it was supposed to be, not just excessive food, but also excessive alcohol. So they take out at least the requirement or expectation of excessive alcohol, though they still do that too. And so they're just appropriating other people's religious traditions and then go back to celebrating the same thing they started with.
Pretty amazing to see how the church will find. The church says, oh, hey, look, these folks are having a good time. And this is a really good idea, right? Why don't we make their version illegal, or at least culturally a pariah? Let's stamp our brand on it, and let's say we did it.
And of course, I'm guessing that other religions do that too. Of course, I'm living in an overwhelmingly Christian culture with the number of them that we have for the percentage per capita, and so I only know how Christianity does this. I haven't been long enough in a Sharia country to know how they, or whether they do the same thing.
Aren't you, buddy? People ask me, they're like, well, first of all, how bad is it in Oklahoma? And of course, we just came off of Governor Mary Fallin, which is just an assault on the senses, science, reason, common sense, morality, everything. She's just a nightmare. And we know we're like a hugely red state, often an anti-science state. And I tell them, well, there are some reasons to stay in this part of the country, cost of living, blah, blah, blah. I also kind of like being an atheist activist in the middle of Jesus Town. But let me present that question to you. In Texas, right? I mean, God and guns, they're everywhere. How do you function in the state of Texas?
Yeah, my wife and I have been to like 22 other countries now, and I've appreciated almost all of them. We've considered. She wants to move. She wants to get out of the United States, and I completely understand. The political scene that we have here is such an embarrassment anymore. But at the same time, I am a professional political activist. It necessitates that I be in the fire, so to speak. So I think that I'm at my best advantage here in Texas, where I can at least go to Austin and give testimony and stuff like that. How am I going to do that if we're living in Nova Scotia or someplace like that?
Is it true, this story I read about leaving Moses in, was it your history books?
Oh, yeah, our history. And they voted to approve this, by the way. Despite every testimony by every expert, our Texas history books cite Moses as a real person who was born in the 12th century BCE, and that he was the primary influence over the founding fathers. Now, I would think that when you make an assertion like that you have to have some evidence to back you up. And not only is there absolutely nothing to back them up, but we have the founding fathers stating flatly that Moses had fuck all to do with what they're doing. We had John Adams saying that that people will say that we based this country on the Ten Commandments, and no, we did not. Although unfortunately, he didn't put it in a flowery bumper sticker type of quote. It rambles on for a whole page of flowery language. But I mean, that is what he says. And he's not alone in that. Several of the founding fathers have said here's the thing. The Christians will say, well, yeah, they put Moses up on a frieze on the Supreme Court. So we know that Moses was an influence someplace. They put Hammurabi next to him. They put all these historic men, and then gods also. They put gods also up there. So how can you have Muhammad and Moses and Hammurabi all in the same frieze, and so you think that it's a Christian country? Clearly, that's not the case.
I guess this has turned out to be kind of a weird show about Christmas.
you brought up
it's true. It's true, and it's something that I think has to be talked about. And honestly, you know how it is when we get over a dinner table, you just never know where the conversation is going to go. While we're not talking about Christmas, Tell me about this. I've seen 3 parts released so far. Your debate with Kent Hoeven, the young Earth creationist apologist who is, I don't know how many years out of prison. And did he approach you and say, let's debate, or did you tap him on the shoulder?
I had, Hoeven was one of my inspirations to become an activist. 20 years or so ago, I started, looking into his arguments and the scams and lies that he was saying. He's the worst.
Well, a lot of people may not know who Kent Hoeven is if you had to paint a verbal portrait of him.
Well, to give you an idea, he once upon a time, he posted this thing offering $250,000 for anybody who could produce evidence of evolution. So you go to his website and you go to click that link to provide that evidence, and then it tells you that he's not actually looking for evidence of evolution. Instead, he wants proof that God couldn't do it. That if God existed, that God still couldn't do it. So you have to assume that if a being that has infinite magic powers and can literally wish anything into being that he wants to, and can, by definition, can do anything he wants, defies his definition that he can't do everything he wants. And that was the setup, the bait and switch that Hoeven did set up for it. So that he could say that, and his followers could say that no one had answered Hoeven's challenge. Even though I myself tried to answer that challenge, you can't, because he doesn't want evidence. He wants proof that if a God existed, that God couldn't do it, which is crazy.
There's some tragic footage of him talking to these large auditoriums loaded with young, impressionable children. And he's always talking about carbon dating, or he says it that way, carbon dating, and the problems with carbon dating. And he ties it to dinosaurs. And of course, I'm like, well, you can't use carbon dating to date dinosaurs. I mean, it's the whole argument begins to explode in your face. Have you seen any of that?
It's a con job, and he does not ever correct his errors. I know a number of people who have posted videos to this or have direct communication with him. So we know that he's seen these messages, and yet he's still repeating the same thing. He just does not ever admit when he's wrong, because he is. And I don't know how to diagnose, but from what I understand about the symptoms of narcissism, he expresses them all. So I would expect that that he would be, because he shows all the symptoms that are listed for narcissism, that he would be diagnosed as such.
Well, I'll send everybody to your channel to go. I mean, they can watch the debates, but give me the snapshot. I mean, what are some highlights?
What happened was that I was invited to be on the Non Sequitur show to argue with Hoeven, and I've seen so many of his debates. And Hoeven doesn't think I have. He says, you go watch my seminars. But the thing is I've seen them. I mean, you have any idea how many times he shows up in my book? I've referred to his arguments and all of his lies forever. And so now he doesn't. Anyway, I know his game. I know how he plays. And I wasn't going to play under his rules. We weren't going to do the equal time thing where he has 20 minutes to tell 2,000 lies. And now I have to have 20 minutes to try to undo the damage on any one of them, so that I can first get out the false information, correct that, and then start explaining the complicated thing in its place. We weren't going to do that. So I only agreed to do it if it was a discussion, which allowed interruption, so that when he started talking about how evolution is the origin of the cosmos, or the origin of life, or how the elements came about, he's mixing all these theories together, insisting that they're all evolution. I could just jump in and correct him and say, no, none of that is true. We're sticking to what it really is. And then it was off his game. And so his own followers were on his Facebook after that, lamenting that they didn't have a better champion than him to put against me. And I was very gratified at that. And so then his people start pressuring him. After he agreed to do a round 2 with us on the Non Sequitur show, when we were on the air, but then as soon as we got off, and they tried to call to schedule that, well, no, they were under instructions that he was not going to come back. He was not going to do it again. So he lied, and surprise, surprise. And then some people kept pressuring him to do this. So he comes up with this idea to do this video exchange debate, and I couldn't resist the debate on that, because this is something he's never done before, and he doesn't know how, and everything favors me.
Oh, now explain that to me. A video exchange debate.
Yeah. It's like his arrangement was that he posts a video to me, and where I post a video to him answering his initial question. His game is he's going to try to rebut my evidence. He asked me for 3 evidences, which we would understand, lines of evidence for evolution. And so I present that. And he's supposed to compose a video to respond to that, and then I pose a video to respond to that, and so on. But what ended up happening was he just starts changing all the rules willy-nilly, and he did this introduction thing where he's making fun of me to his people in his office. So in my response video, I do a similar introduction to him and calling him out in similar fashion. And then I answer the question. So it's 20 minutes long, and his initial response was 7 videos, not one video like he said, but 7 videos averaging 46 minutes each in response to that 120-minute video, where only about 10 minutes of that video was actually based on the debate. And so what I understand now is that he's still posting replies to the videos I'm making now in response to that, but he'll answer 1 minute with a 30 or 40 minute video to answer 1 minute of text, so that it will drag on forever.
Are we seeing, though, the evolution of creationism, where it's, we're not seeing the 6,000-year-old Earth argument nearly as much?
Hoeven is still doing it. So
okay, but I mean, beyond Hoeven, do we find that most of the mainstream apologists, or have they drifted into this sort of nebulous ID response?
What I figured out is that creationists, this is the religious extremists who have to deny reality in order to maintain their beliefs. They don't understand if you were just to accept evolutionary science and do the Francis Collin thing. Just accept what the science says, and you can always put a God behind it. You can always say that whatever happens, happens because God wanted it to happen, and that's including evolution, that's including abiogenesis. All these things happen because God set it up to happen, and you can go ahead and believe in your God that way. But what these people do is they put themselves where they have to combat science, and they have to deny science, and that puts them in a very awkward position where they end up losing, and what they end up losing is their faith. So this is a religious extremism thing where people go into it all or nothing, and then eventually some of them figure out that one thing goes wrong and it all goes wrong. It's a house of cards and it's all gone. So there are moderate Christians who I think are the mainstream, not just in this country but in any country, who want to take that middle of the road position where you understand that science is real. And you'd be a fool to deny science, but you can always imagine that whatever the story of our origins is, that when you die, you go to heaven or hell based on some ridiculous judgment of this, whether you see Santa or Krampus.
I just love it when you get worked up. I mean, sometimes I don't even care about the answer. I just want to push that button. Just watch it go. Yeah, I agree. We have to destroy the false. We have to make more room for the true. And we're seeing creationism and intelligent design in all of its forms out there. And you've been a big player in that. You have a lot of great educational.
Let's just talk about that for a moment, if I can. I'm sorry to step
in here. Not at all. Go ahead, please.
I'm just a jerk, and I just do that.
No, not at all.
Why? Why are we upset about this? I mean, if I were to see a teacher tell the class that Columbus discovered Ohio in 1942, or if you saw a class where that they teach that Benjamin Franklin was the first king of America, would you get upset at either of these things?
Wait, Benjamin Franklin wasn't the first king of America? Yeah, I'd be upset. I think that's ridiculous,
Anytime you hear somebody teaching children something that is wrong, it's just the fact that it is wrong, it needs to be corrected. And so people will say, well, I have a right to believe that Benjamin Franklin was our first president. Okay, yeah, you actually do have a right to believe lies. But you're teaching this to other kids, and those kids have a right to be told the truth. Even if they then forsake that right and want to believe in fairy tale nonsense after that, they have a right to be told the truth. They have a right not to be lied to by people in positions of authority. So that's what really irritates me. I hate to see people being deceived. I hate watching the televangelists con the little old ladies into passing over all of their money. And I have people in my family that have done that are absolutely impoverished, completely stricken broke. I'm like, well, how you make this much money? And you don't pay anything. You don't have any overhead. Why are you broke? And then I find out how much they've been tithing to their church. Why? And when they get desperate, well, that's when they're tithing even more, because now they need blessings.
Yeah.
So
that's a tactic. I mean, I've heard those sermons, where they're like talking about it's a faith gesture, and it was the woman who was down to her last dime who gave I forgot what they call it. There's a name for it, but it's like this gift that you're casting your bread upon the waters kind of a thing. And 3 weeks later, she got a check in the mail for the exact amount of all of her bills. And, I always tell people, it's like driving by, we got a Hard Rock casino here a few miles down the road. And I'm like, they never put the losers on that billboard. You never see, hey, Maud lost $3,000 on YMCA slots last Friday. You never see the losers. You only hear the stories about the winners, the church's marketing, that kind of a winning story.
And did that person ever actually win?
Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite story is for people local here in Dallas. What is his name? I can't remember.
As a pastor, apologist,
Kenneth Copeland. There's an insidiously evil person. So,
well, I mean, I have no love for Copeland, but you call him insidiously evil.
Oh yes.
All right.
Oh yes. All right. The way that they claim to cure cancer, for example, when know they're not actually curing cancer, and this is the big one. So there was a woman in Louisiana who won the lottery. And at the same time, she also was diagnosed with cancer. And so she donated in many, many different multitudes. She just kept making huge donations, bigger and bigger donations, until she personally funded Kenneth Copeland's $20 million private jet. All on the expectation that the Copelands were going to cure her cancer. And of course, she died of cancer. And the Copelands used their jet for big game hunting expeditions and ski resort excursions. And
is all this documented? Like, if I want to track all this down, I can go and...
They did a news story about it. It was a beautiful expose documentary.
Wow.
So I'm not just talking out of my ass here. This is something.
No. I mean, I know you, but I have to do my due diligence and ask that question. And
that's the thing. It's like you said. They set up the thing where they make an announcement about the one person who got the check for all the money, the exact amount of all of her bills, and we have no reason to believe that ever happened. If it did happen, it was probably set up for the one advertising example that you brought up. But then we have these other things, the real life things that they don't publicize, that are a lot heavier, like James Randi's story, where he goes to one of these evangelical faith healing things and somebody throws their medication up on the stage because they don't need it anymore and they're going to live without their medication now. So he goes to visit that person, finds that person's address, goes to visit that person to see how they're holding up without their medication. And as he walks up, they're carrying her out on a gurney because she's dead. Yep. So that's Randi's story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's done a lot of work exposing the faith healers and whatnot. But I understand the insidious nature of it. Copeland, it was his family that was behind was it his daughter teaching the anti-vax message down there in Texas? And before you know it, there's a
measles outbreak out here.
There's a measles in her church. There was a measles outbreak in her church. It just boggles the mind. And I think it was Gloria Copeland. Oh shit! I always get my evangelist. Either that or it was Jim Bakker's wife. Who just creeps me the hell out, by the way, who was saying Jesus. I
was thinking of Tammy Faye Baker.
I don't know, whoever it was talking about how Jesus is our flu shot. Jesus is our inoculation. Jesus conquered sickness. Jesus. And
that is Gloria Copeland.
The fact that we're having to have these types of conversations, there's an anti-science spike that is happening. I don't know, I can't process how much of a cultural impact it's having. But if we're reading about measles resurging in almost the year 2019, it does make me very concerned.
This conversation comes down to, that we are reportedly denying God just because we want to sin, which obviously, this is laughable to us. Like, we know that if there was a God, why would we pretend that there's not a God? Because the one thing that really pisses God off is when you don't believe in him. right? So if you want to guarantee that you're going to go to hell, say you don't believe in God. But if you love sin, like they accuse us of doing, become a Christian and all your sins will be forgiven. And then you can continue sinning all you want to, because there are denominations. You just pick a denomination that allows that, because there are denominations that allow that. So if you love sin, be a Christian. But the problem is we don't love sin, we love truth. That's why we don't say things are true unless we can show that they are true. And if somebody says something that isn't true, well, we're going to correct that person, even if it's our friend. I mean, you and I have criticized each other if we say something wrong. And then, well, I will fix that. Because that's what we're doing. But the religious people don't. It's all about the make-believe. And it's when they say, and this is one of my biggest cries, is when they tell me, why can't I believe what I want to believe, even if I know it's not true? Why does something have to be true before I can believe it? I've had that question asked. These may be what the facts are, but I prefer to believe this. Okay, fine. Then you don't care what the truth is. And that's why people, like Hoeven's people, have been emailing me again and again and again over the last couple of weeks. And they always demand to see my one single item of evidence, or my one single evidence, as they put it. And then I'll put up like 5 or 6 of them. And they get angry, and they refuse to look at any of them. I'm like, pick one. Listen, you don't have to do them all. Do one. Pick one. And they won't. They won't look at anything. If it requires actually looking at a video, explaining what this video, no, they're not. Yeah, it's a 10-minute video, explains exactly what the evidence is. Look at it. No, they won't.
I'll send everybody.
They want to know what the truth is.
I'll send everybody to your page. And you know what? I didn't want to talk about Christmas. Like, who gives a shit? Like, it's the same every year. By the way, if I was to get you a gift, a Christmas gift, now I'm not giving mine up, but if I was to give you a Christmas gift, this is the puzzle box from a horror film from the 1980s.
I recognize that.
This is the puzzle box from Hellraiser, and it actually opens. I always forget. Now, this is when I open the portal to hell, I think, whenever I open this. But if I had my druthers, if I had the opportunity, how do I open the portal to hell? I would give you this, and then you could open the portal to hell on your own time, and, you know, do your own. Oh, there it is. There it is. And there's, forget which is the lament configuration, but it actually works like in the film. And you pop it open and it goes down. So I don't know. I just thought of you. I thought, well, you know, if you're going to be Satan Claus, you're going to need this. You know, you need
the
an extra.
Problem is somebody's already done that, and we need to figure out how to get the box up and get rid of Trump.
My friend, I don't know what you're going to do for the next few weeks, whatever traditions that you celebrate, whatever you're doing. I hope you're with your people and that you guys make some memories and that your life is good. Things going well for you?
I think so. I'm having a bucket of chuckles with my video debate exchange right now, and I'm liking where the Phylogeny Explorer project is going, and I'm going to be starting promoting that.
Well, explain it real fast. Phylogeny Explorer project is.
Yeah, believe it or not, we've got a team of, let's say, dozens of people. I think there's a couple dozen people that are working in various types of programming, admin, and various structures. And we've got like a couple of hundred volunteers that are doing the filling out the actual taxa. And now we've started inviting professional scientists to contribute to their areas of expertise. And the goal is we want to create an online encyclopedia of the entire phylogenetic tree of life, the whole tree of life, where you can look up individual clades and find out what is the value of that clade. And so the best way to explain that is in my video series on the systematic classification of life. And it's like 35 videos so far. And once I'm done with Hoeven here, the end of this month or middle of December, before the end of the year, I'll be done with him. And then I'm going to go back into promoting that.
I mean, do I have to be kind of a geek like you to be able to get into it? Is it a resource that every person can use?
It is available online right now for anybody and without a login, but it's not public yet because there are some issues with we can't have a lot of traffic to the site.
All right.
And I had a university that was saying, okay, you want us to host your website? Okay, fine, we'll do that. We'd be happy to do that. And then when I started, I said, oh, that's great. And I started explaining what it is. And they're like, oh, no,
Yeah,
No,
a lot of resources.
That's too much.
Okay, well, I won't proactively shoot everybody your direction. We'll let you iron that out and whatnot. But it sounds like some good things are happening. We're all about good information. So from all of my family to yours, I hope the holidays are good. And, I'll look for an extra one of these to send you for the... for Christmas, my friend. Any final thoughts on Christmas, on 2019, politics, evolution, anything else you want to put a punctuation mark on this conversation for me?
No, I have gotten to the point where I don't put up Christmas lights. I don't put up a Christmas tree. I've done all my Christmas tree. I think I put up a Christmas tree one year and I left it up for 3 years.
That's Aron. That's my buddy right there. That's and you know what? I like it. I like the idea, right? You're saving time, energy, resources. Just put it up, leave it up. Merry Christmas. Aron Ra, my friend, I'm going to put the link to, what's the best link to put in the description box? Do you want your website, YouTube channel, Patreon?
That's the best introduction that I have going right now.
What is it?
Patreon.com/ARONRA.
Okay, I'll make sure and put that in the description box. For what it's worth, have a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and it's great to talk to you, brother.
Thank you, you too.